Are you cold?
Yeah, man.
You're cold?
Do I have my coat?
Anthony forced me to be on the show on condition of not wearing my earphones.
Which is
A
weird
hat, sunglasses, and maybe combat boots.
I thought Mark
A suit, but I couldn't quite manage the suit. Didn't feel like I had time to throw it on.
Jobs of the future. That okay, big coat. Good evening. Welcome to Oh Say Can You See? Produced by CTV. My name is Pablo Bello. I'm international journalist covering politics, society, and tonight science and technology. Our guest tonight is Anthony, Mark, and Wolfgang. How are you, Anthony?
Good. Good.
Anthony has a background on education and technology. He has spent several years working all over China and Asia in general. On the center we have a Mark. Mark, how are you, Mark?
I'm okay. I'm good.
Mark is has a background in education and community. He's an educator and community builder for sustainable solutions. And on the stream left, we have Wolfgang. How are you, Wolfgang?
Very good yourself.
Wolfgang is a medical researcher and technology advisor to investors and organizations, international organizations. Tonight we're going to talk about how to build a sustainable future. Can you explain what is this topic tonight, Anthony?
Well, we had set out to want to understand a little bit more about, in my mind, the double-edged sword of technological advancements. So, on the one hand, you have technology, which is a boon for us. We can talk to each other, text message each other, communicate with each other by FaceTime, and we can learn a ton of things. As we were saying before in our earlier conversations, we can have a lot of information, but in my mind, there are some, maybe not dark sides, but other areas to consider, other considerations. For example, people's jobs and how this technological advancement will affect the economy and how the future might look in 5 or 10 years. So that's
Well, according to our previous conversation, the future is dark, right, Anthony?
I'm not so sure.
Like no jobs, people are going to get degrees on computer science, these jobs are going to disappear, engineers, competition all over the world.
Lots
So-
of employment displacement in the U.S. and the rest of the first world. I mean, this is how you laid it out to us.
Yeah,
before.
I'm thinking there will be a transition period. A lot of this is based on my reading of a book, listening, it's an audio book called Industries of the Future by Hillary Clinton's innovation advisor while she was Secretary of State. And he talks a lot about robotics, and my main idea here talking about is how this transition may or may not be good. So I'm not so fixed on the idea it's going to be dark or it's going to be negative, but I'm more thinking about it in terms of how we will adjust to it and transition to a society where robots and machines take over to a large degree the jobs that we once believed we were training for, and how that will affect us and how that transition, that displacement will occur. And also, I'm very interested in how big companies, will they push us forward in terms of in terms of setting good models for development, or will they set forth models of profit, or they will set forth models where they profit but society doesn't necessarily advance?
Well, this is already happening, right, Anthony?
Yeah.
I mean, corporations are taking jobs to
But
China.
to take a bigger picture, this has happened before historically. I mean, in the sense that, imagine being hunters and gatherers, and then all of a sudden this group of people decided that they were going to be farmers. So the hunter and gatherers would say, hey, this is destroying our way of life. What ridiculous thing is this, staying in one place? And then it happened more recently over the 17th, 18th century in the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution, it displaced 90% of the jobs that existed then into manufacturing. And it was very unpleasant, crowded cities, tremendous pollution that was completely out of control. And so now as we entering the information, smart algorithm, Internet of Things kind of an era, same type of dislocation and transition. The question is, and this is where perhaps Mark has the expertise, is in terms of how do we, in terms of society, choose to go through this transition? And then in terms of you, Tony, in terms of your background in education, your understanding, having lived in Asia, how can we make it in a way that is sustainable for our society and going into the future? And so there's no question that dislocation is going to be uncomfortable, but at the same time, I think it's going to be both good and bad. And perhaps we can even step away from looking at things, at the technology as being good or bad. It just is. It is coming. Nanotechnology,
Right.
New energy that is coming online, algorithms that allow us to have insight into all kinds of things in terms of our health, in terms of our job. No longer are we going to be dependent on a corporation for a job, but new young people, the next generation of college people and people getting skills, are looking in terms of how can I start a new business? How can I go from vertical, where everything is provided in one place, to horizontal, where I have layers of stacks of peer-to-peer transactions, Uber, BB, bed and breakfast that you can
Airbnb,
do through your
yeah.
application, right?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we are losing jobs,
Well,
Big unemployment, Bernie Sanders on one side, Donald Trump on the other side.
Well, what I think is interesting is that in this year, you have essentially a populist revolt, in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party.
Because there are no jobs.
That's
So
exactly
is it
why.
technology driven or philosophically, would you say, Mark?
Well,
in
I
your-
think there's been a philosophical standpoint on the part of the Republicans, especially, but also the Democrats, the new way, third way Democrats like the Clintons, to allow for a kind of brutal transition to take place, saying, "Oh, it'll all be better in the end." But I really don't have any faith that it will be better. And besides that, the way I look at it, and I assume the way Sanders looks at it, and perhaps even the way Trump looks at it, behind his hate speech, is that the people as an electorate really have a choice to decide how this transition will take place. And if the transition involves making sure that people are not unduly hurt or unduly shattered and then scattered around and said, well, you're on your own to find your way in the new economy, that's kind of the question here. If it's something that takes place with the understanding that we're still a community and that we have a responsibility to our fellow citizens, then I think that we can go into a future like that less damaged as a society, with less risk that we'll have, even violent revolt
And
down
that's
the
why
line.
I am personally optimistic that yes, technology can do some catastrophic things, but it can do also some wonderful things in terms of community building. In where I get my food, I can get my food locally. I can have an app that tells me all the different places and all the different people that raise food that I can get access to. It tells me ways in terms of how I can conserve energy and use renewable energy.
Well, that's I guess those are the sorts of jobs of the future that, one can create for themselves using, different information technologies and other sorts of innovations, perhaps like 3D printers or whatever. But on a political level, I think that if we elect a leadership that is determined not to leave it up to the centralized corporations and the kind of sort of brutal, let the chips fall where they may kind of perspective on this, so much the better.
Well, but let me tell you, like, unemployment is high because corporations in the United States, like GM, Ford, all these big corporations, they used to have these big industries here in Michigan, Detroit especially, and then, for example, GM and Flint, they decide to move their business to China or to Mexico, and to pay $1.50 per hour to Mexican workers or Chinese workers for jobs that they were paying $16 or $20 here, or maybe more per hour. So this is the reality, right?
Well, that's why the new generation. I have 3 children who are in their 20s, and every single one of them, their aspiration is not to work for GM or IBM or some of the big corporations. Their aspiration is to do a startup, and to do a startup in collaboration with other young people doing also startups. So rather than doing this vertical big corporation that provides, this the big daddy or mommy in this case, who provides for everything, how do we develop communities? And so corporations are having a difficult time hiring qualified young people interested in working for them, because this young generation have seen their parents downsized and losing their homes, and they've experienced all this, and they're saying, you know what, we want to do something different. And so this is where I'm kind of hopeful in, with that very technology savvy, and they will be able to take advantage of a lot of these resources to create a totally different future where whether corporations stay in the US or go to China or Mexico, it becomes irrelevant because they have their own means of production.
But what happened with this mentality of having stuff, like cars, big house, 2 cars, furniture, appliances? I mean, are they going to be able to surpass this?
The newer generations, I remember when I was 16 years old, even when I was 14, my number one goal when I was 14 years old is that when I hit 16, I was going to get my driver's license and I was going to get a car. Because that's how you could attract girls, or so I thought back then when I was in high school. I noticed these young kids, they're not interested in getting a car because they realize all the expenses. They carpool a whole lot more. They want to live in urban places that has been renewed, and they can bicycle from one point A to point B. So there's a lot of less materialism. Not only that, they've built their content. In other words, their programming, their TV, their gaming, so that advertisers don't have access to them. So they're not susceptible to the same consumeristic society. At the same time, they're very intrigued in terms of 3D technology, 3D printing, for example. So in terms of getting stuff, they will be able to have the technology and the resources to create their own stuff. And so it's like my son, I offer him for Christmas, I say, look, you can have for your Christmas present, if you want, the latest and greatest smartphone, which is something close to $1,000, $900, $1,000. He said, no, I really don't need that. I'm perfectly happy with the $200 one that can do everything that I need. And I thought to myself, like, wow, this is a very unique. I'm not so sure if he's representative of that younger generation, but I see more and more in where there's a shift.
He is your son.
He's my son, it's true. I'm so very proud of him.
Well, you're influencing his thinking.
How long is going to take this change?
I think it's going to be fast and slow, all at the same time.
Because in the meantime, we have Donald Trump blaming the immigrants for this horrible economic crisis. I mean, he's blaming the people who speak in blueberries and apples here in West Michigan for the catastrophic economic crisis from 2008.
I mean, politicians do.
And it seems like
politicians do-
he's winning, man.
Politicians do what they need to do in order to win, and whatever that is. So if he's going to be blaming somebody who's speaking blackberries, that's one thing. But if the reality is, talk about the future that Tony's talking about, is that we're going to have robotics at some point, or nanorobotics, taking care of farming. So it's going to wipe out all the farming jobs in the not too distant future. And so the question is, what do these immigrants do? Well, hopefully they will have access to knowledge and resources in where even in their home country, they can develop technologies never dreamed before. So like in Argentina, I was very shocked. This is like 20 years ago, I remember going there. And I would go back into the rural places, the Pampas area, and they never had actually landlines, but they were able to leapfrog the technology, and everybody was using cell phones. The per capita use of cell phones 20, 25 years ago was greater in South America than it was in the US. So I think very likely with the technologies coming online, that they will be able to have smarter, better ways of doing soil enrichment so they can grow their own crops, to have access to sources of energies and so forth. And so a lot of these immigrants, if they had a choice of having a stable and safe place where they can actually provide for their families, they will stay home. And so I could see that shift could actually happen. But I'm not saying that technology is the end all or the be all that's going to be wonderful. I think some terrible things are going to happen. Just as terrible things happened when we became mechanized, where it used to be you had to shoot people one by one. It was a hand-to-hand combat, before that with swords or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And now in the industrial age, they developed machine guns that you could kill thousands of people in a matter of minutes. Mm-hmm. And so
there's the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
Exactly. So technology now is going to be able to give a lot of people some very destructive powers, but also, ideally, hopefully, humanity will be able to evolve faster to be able to create signals inside the technology, inside the algorithms, to be able to do smart, sustainable things. And people like Mark, who's very much involved in terms of community building, in terms of being peer-to-peer support of growing our own food, buying local and things like that, that will be more accessible. Because if I want to buy a microwave, I have no choice but to buy it from China, even if I didn't want to. But with 3D technology, I would be able to print it locally. And so, again, producers and consumers will become the same people, and now we'll be able to trade with our neighbors. I may not even like my neighbors, but I would rather give him my money than to give it to some person that I don't even know across, miles away that I have
Someone
no
in
connection.
Texas.
But
I think there's a problem involved in all of this. I think that ultimately, it's great if people can make their own niche economically, their own jobs, so to speak. But really, when we ask everyone to be their own, enlightened and intelligent, well-educated job producer, we're asking something of our society that no society has been able to do up to this point. And I really think it's an invitation for many people to be in dire, dire poverty. And I think that short term, we need to elect a kind of government that will protect our basic industries and make sure that we have a place for people who just do, old-fashioned labor, because expecting everyone to, be linked up on the networks and doing their jobs of the future in a short period of time, I think is unfair, and we need to politically ameliorate that by.
But let me tell you, in the meantime, here in reality on the earth, I mean, there are no jobs, I mean, like in Detroit, people used to work on the factories and put together big pieces.
They're gone.
And
Even
then,
if they're in China, they're going to be gone in China because
and then
automation is going to take over.
came these robots, and now they're doing the job of thousands of people, right? Mm-hmm. And this is reality.
You're right. The reality
and these jobs, now the brilliant idea from corporations is take these jobs to China, mm-hmm. or India or
and
Indonesia.
That's going to be short term because China's going to
Mexico.
have jobs in the next 10, 15 years perhaps, but then automation is going to take over and it's going to wipe out those jobs. So what happens then? And at that point it's like, okay, do I need to buy products from China if I can produce the product internally? To your point, Mark, it is true. I mean, ideally, if we elect governments that can make that transition smooth, that would be the ideal. The challenge for me personally is whether the government does it or not, regardless of who wins the election November 8th, what can we do as individuals, as community, and I know you've been involved with community type of activities much longer than I have, how can we really help each other to help that transition, to help our neighbors in ways that become sustainable, using the technologies that are becoming available to us?
Well, so you're saying the jobs of the future are not the corporate jobs, they're the local jobs that we create for ourselves through total innovation that doesn't have anything to do with the centralized economy as it exists right now.
Centralized economy is going to be gone, as far as I'm concerned, because even if it's going to China, China is going to be wiped out, those jobs, by automation. So the question, because that's happening, it's inevitable. What can we do right here, right now, with ourselves, with our communities, in order to be able to make the transition safe and well for our neighbors and our families, but also in terms of going forward to the future?
The way I kind of see it too is that it's kind of like like you talked about before, when we transition from the agricultural revolution or the agricultural society to the industrial society. So you had all these people who were displaced. But they weren't really. They were they were moving into factory jobs and so forth. But this is a kind of a different.
They were also flopping dead on the streets.
Yeah.
There was this horrible tragedy. Farmers coming to the cities looking for jobs. There were no housing. There were no services, no social services. Until like 100 years later, the unions came and they started fixing everything, right? Like social services and all this kind of
It takes time.
progress,
But
right?
humans are
You
wired
say
for survival.
100 years, right?
It was 100 years of displacement between the industrial and between the farming, agricultural to the industrial. It was a 100-year dislocation that happened that created a lot of pain and suffering for a lot of people. Do we have to go through the same dislocation now? Ideally not, like Mark is saying, if we can elect some smart politicians. I don't know, maybe I wonder if that's even realistic.
Here's where I see is different though between that revolution and this revolution is that was an addition revolution. See, you're adding jobs in the shape of in form of industrial or they had agricultural work, but they were adding jobs in the form of factory work. This is a subtraction process now. So what
But
we're
actually,
doing,
no, the farming, 90% of the jobs used to be farming, and those, because it was mechanized, 90% of those jobs went away.
well, they went away, but there was the addition of jobs in terms of factory, wide scale, a massive amount of factories. Like, for example, how many people were working in the auto industry at one time? Maybe like, I think 1 in 10 jobs were created in some way, shape, or form in the auto industry, whether it was people making this or doing sand for the glass, as Mark was saying, or different kinds of industries.
Millions of people in Michigan did everything.
What
And
this is-
now it's largely outsourced.
What robots-
things that come in from China and then they get assembled here.
What robots are doing, like for example, Uber cars. We were talking about Uber cars. They're a revolution because you're democratizing transportation. You're doing the kinds of things. You're allowing people with an app to say, I need a ride. I'm going to
For the audience, explain what Uber is, peer-to-peer.
But I mean, like Uber, what Uber is doing is taking jobs away from the taxi drivers.
But the net is that there's more jobs though. The net is
taxi
that you
driver
take taxi.
charge you what, $20 for a ride?
Actually, in New York, for example, I was there recently.
No, right
for
here
me
in
to go to the
Michigan, no?
airport. In Michigan, I'm not so sure in terms of, I don't take, I drive everywhere in Michigan.
$20 for
But let's say to go to the
5 miles,
airport,
10 miles, no?
let's say it's $35. Uber would be like $15. So
And,
it's about
and
half,
Uber, they charge you like
50% less.
$10, no? Like,
50% less. I'm not so sure exactly what the ratios are. But it is,
and you don't even know who the driver is or
the driver,
what are his qualifications.
They have to be registered. They are in a major database. If anything goes wrong, they're suspended from being part of that network. And there, a lot of taxi drivers, it's a very dangerous, more dangerous than being a police officer. There's a lot of, the number one murder by class is taxi drivers. And so rather, the person who's soliciting the service, also they are in the database, in the system. So the payment is automatic. Nobody has to take a credit card or they have to pay cash because it's all automatic. So he gets his services. he passes on also the savings onto the. So rather than having a vertical taxi business with all kinds of regulations and so forth, now you have peer-to-peer. I'm not saying that it's better, but I'm saying is that it's
They have a
democratizing.
union. They have a union, and the union is going to be destroyed with this,
Wow, those taxi drivers a lot in so many places
Uber, no?
has been basically taken away.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, and bed and breakfast. You have all the people who work in the hotel industry. If I'm going to Paris, rather than paying $300 or $500 a night, I'd rather pay $75 or $35 to a local family who's going to feed me breakfast and so forth. And now I can see the reviews of previous people who've been there. It's telling me whether this is a good place, whether they serve good food, whether it's a good environment, safe place for me to be at. And so now I'm dealing with people to people, locally and globally. So this is going to be a game changer. So the idea that we're going to depend on some greater government or entity or institutions, that's going to be gone. Is it going to create displacement? Absolutely. Should we have policies in place to create signals inside those advanced computer systems to make it sustainable for humans? We should.
Making it accessible to everyone.
And
too.
accessible in the digital divide.
But
The
what,
digital
what,
divide,
what are the main industries or technologies right now?
Robotics is a big one, and
What is
big-
robotics?
Robotics is not just creating metal and glass structures, but it's about it's also a big industry is big data analytics. So crunching big
Computerized
data.
tasks,
Yeah.
robotics.
And my
Like
argument,
Google,
Google, right? Well, my argument is, well, I agree that this is gonna, this transition and so forth is gonna take place. But with this is bigger than anything that we've ever experienced before. A bigger transition, and I think I agree with Wolfgang that you need a new paradigm. Like, for example, everybody's screaming, "We need jobs! We need jobs!" Well, that paradigm of where you work 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, with 2 weeks vacation, and you just work yourself to death.
It's a minority of people who have that.
I
these days, for
think
sure.
that whole paradigm of living like that may be replaced by 3D printers, which is already, I've read an article about how the 3D printer is reinventing local industry. There's one guy who invests $100,000 in your local Grand Rapids community, buys a 3D printer, he can make all the doodads that you need for everyone, or for some kinds
Well,
of
and also
doodads.
it's also like a technical staff just pointed out just a moment ago, one of the big things that we haven't discussed about, and that's something that I know you guys are experts on, is education. Because unless you have an educated, like you're saying, in terms of how do you expect as a society to be able to access all this wonderful information about health, about our environment and everything, if we don't have an educated class. And so it's kind of paradoxical when we have more education available on the internet. I have last year, on my own personal training and development, I took 380 hours of personal training and development. But I'm a very disciplined, nerdy kind of a guy.
But you're an autodidactic as well.
Also, and that's unreasonable to expect to everybody. But fundamentally, how do you teach people enough so that they can learn on their own, so they can learn in groups in terms of how to produce and how to not be hopelessly dependent upon some bigger than life entity, and that all requires education. So how do we educate people? And I know that's one area. I know
It's kind of a paradox, I think, it's kind of interesting because it almost requires a higher level entity like a government or a corporation to
What
sort
requires?
of this revolution in education and so forth. Because when, like, you're an autodidact and you like to learn on your own and you like to take the information highway and go for a ride and all that. But not everybody's like that.
Right.
A lot of people are like, well, there's the information highway.
But do you really
We're-
believe
we're-
the government is going to be the be-all solution to your challenges
Well,
in life?
Oh, not necessarily. I don't think the government will help. But if the governments can work to transition us. But here's what corporations and governments are doing is that they're actually profiting off of this transition for the small minority. And what's not happening is technology and automation is not getting passed, the benefits of it are getting passed down to the common people, but it's like Reaganomics, they're trickling down. I think the real benefits of automation and sending jobs overseas is going to the few elite right now.
Well, that's what I love about
And
the
to the
hackers.
investment class.
Yeah,
The
this
internet was never meant for you and I,
this
for
is
none of us.
this is what's happening. Like, there are no jobs. So what happened?
Right.
People is very angry, and here comes this demagogue, Donald Trump, who's promising to bring back these jobs from China and from Indonesia, which is just lies.
No, you know what?
I mean,
have to say, I don't think-
how he's gonna bring jobs from China?
You know, this is
You
the
think
thing.
the DuBois family is gonna bring jobs from Asia, where they make like tons of money, to bring these factories to Grand Rapids or
I
Michigan?
have to say, Pablo, that we have to rely on Bernie Sanders to do that for us, because the reason that people are voting for Trump, besides the fact that they like his hate speech, is that he's talking about bringing jobs back from China. It's not impossible. As he says, if you start a kind of protectionist policy to protect your own industries rather than giving everything over to your own investment class in Wall Street, you can recreate what we had, and it's not so far gone that we couldn't recreate it. And
Guys.
that is possible.
So,
And you
so
can
we
do it
have
through
two options.
Sanders
We
rather
have
than through Trump.
we
But
have
the past is
Bernie
gone.
Sanders.
I mean, but
Bernie
we can
Sanders,
still make
who
things
is
here.
who's
You know,
promising.
we can still have employment for people. If the jobs exist at all, we can have them exist here. And it's unfair to our fellow citizens to just say, oh, well, that was the past and it's gone now. Since we're the voters, we can decide. And we can
do have a point.
disenfranchise these people who stole everything
You
from us.
do have a point in terms of for the short window that we have for the next
Right,
15
right.
years, in where before we still have some sort of semblance of manufacturing that requires humans. We could have those jobs here, so you got a point there. But what we're saying, when we look further out, to Tony's point, in terms of further to the future, is those jobs in China, Vietnam, everywhere are going to disappear because we're going to have automation.
I
Sure.
want to back up that 1 second. Is that there's a guy named Gu who runs a company called Fusican in China, and Foxconn produces all the iPads. But Gu's factories now, he has a huge workforce of over 1 million employees, I want to say. And every year, and he plans to eliminate all the jobs. His plan in the next 5 to 10 years, this guy Gu, is to make all of his factories robotic, or all the machine.
Like
he's buying
100% robot.
Yeah, he's buying everything to make his factories, which is he's a huge employer in China, to be robotic. Now, this is because not only the technology is there, but also the wage for the Chinese employee in the last couple decades has gone up threefold. So they're moving their manufacturing
To
to
Vietnam.
cheaper pastures like Sri Lanka,
Ethiopia,
Vietnam, and so forth. But that can only go on for so long. But the combined effect of automation and sort of high, the developing countries' job markets becoming too expensive and moving to, I mean, that can go on for a while. But what I see is that this total, I agree with you in a way that we have to create a completely different paradigm. See, everybody's crying about jobs, but we have to stop talking about jobs and start talking about how we can create sustainable communities.
Yeah, because
Sure.
if we're going to be dependent upon some greater entity who already has abandoned us,
Right.
and
Right.
say, "Oh, please,
They've
pretty please come
abandoned
back."
us for a
That's
long
what the next generation. I'm so hopeful about the next generation, because they're saying, "You know what? We don't want to be part of it. We rather work ourselves on a peer-to-peer transactional platform that is horizontal versus vertical, so that we can sustain
Well,
ourselves."
ultimately, we're going to have a society that knows how to have a society, a mass society. Say the United States still existing, or China still existing, or just societies of this large, stabilized, political scale, where people don't have to have jobs to justify their existence. Because if machines are going to be able to do everything, or if we go small scale and do things for ourselves, ultimately, I think the logic of technology and computerization and the amount of, the speed of transition is such that really people shouldn't even now need to do things in order to be alive or to justify their existence. So we have to start preparing for that kind of,
Well, it seems to me
mind,
this sounds wonderful. These ideas about technology.
It's wonderful and
but-
terrible.
But in reality, I mean, corporations are controlling production, right? and
It's getting
and
away
they,
from them.
And
They
they
control
want,
the technology.
and they want profits. You know,
The whole thing, the whole
They-
paradigm is shifting.
they don't care about people, though.
They don't care about people.
Well, so
And
then
guess
they're
what?
in a politically unstable
The
situation.
next generation don't care about them. They're having a hard time. I know.
And then, so what you are proposing is like some kind of primitive community.
I think you need to you need
no,
you
a
need to
vertical,
stimulate.
transactional, peer-to-peer, a sustainable community. So I met a guy recently. He's like 28, 29 years old. And he was offered a job making $120,000. He turned it flat down. I asked him, why don't you take this job? He says, well, I'm going to have to wear a tie and a suit and probably work for an asshole. And I was very curious about that.
We try not to say that here. On
Bleep,
Sorry.
bleep that out.
So here's somebody who's who did all the right things, went to school, have all the talent and skills. Google wants to hire him. All these companies want to hire him. And he realizes that, hey, you know what? That my future is not there. My future is working with my other young, bright people to create a sustainable future. And so the question is this isolated narrative duplicable across the board? And then, what does he do? Even if he can do his own production, small-scale production you're talking about, Mark, does he have the energy to be able to do that?
Oh, we have a telephone.
Rick, welcome back to CTV. Rick, go ahead, Rick. Rick,
Ricardo?
Rick,
Hi, Rick.
Rick.
Hello?
Hello, I can barely hear you, Rick.
I haven't said anything yet.
There, okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just wondering, we're living in a very technologically advanced age now, and you mentioned robotics, and, we're never going to get rid of all jobs. Some things will just have to be done, like hospital jobs, police, fire, what have you. But in terms of making jobs obsolete, either because they move to other countries, and I'm just speaking about this country right now. I do know we live in a global economy, but whether the jobs are transferred to other countries or whether they're just eliminated through automation, I think some people will just sort of be left in the cracks if we don't do anything proactive. And I don't just mean education for new jobs, because who knows if those new jobs will ever appear or whether people will ever be qualified. Now, what I'm about to throw out here for discussion is rather utopian, even for liberals, but what would all of you think about the idea of some kind of an income floor, a guaranteed annual income, which even Richard Nixon proposed way back in the day?
I think it's a great idea. I think that we should have more of that, yeah.
I thought you might say so, Marco. What about the other gentleman?
Well, I just think like the way with these politicians, with Republicans in power, this is impossible. They don't care about people.
Nixon did propose it, though, but he was a different kind of Republican.
Or Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders.
Well, I think the social
I'm feeling
democracy.
the burn, Mark.
I think this idea that we're going to run our country like Sweden or Denmark, and I think or Norway. I think it's a good
It's possible.
good idea. I think
It's possible.
I don't believe in total maybe like the communist model of
Well, I'm not talking
where
about socialism.
Socially.
where you'd make everyone have the same income, where doctors would make the same as
No,
as
nobody's saying that.
Well, this is the wealthiest country in the world. Why is not this possible?
Well, guaranteed income, I have to confess, is not an area that I really know very much about. But I think Rick, you have a very good point that if everything is going to be automated, because I happen to work in the health and life science industry, so hospital jobs. If you break your arm today, you have to see the emergency doctor, then you have to see the X-ray technician, then an orthopedic doctor sees you, and by the time everything is said and done, $5,000 have blown by.
I know.
In the near future, you'll be able to stick your arm out, the diagnostic, the casting, and everything is going to be done in a matter of minutes, eliminating 6 jobs in the process, including the medical doctors. And so what happens then? So this guaranteed
lose jobs.
well, 6 medical people would lose their jobs. And so the guaranteed income is a very intriguing proposition, and I have to confess I don't know enough about it to be able to really make a
Well,
statement.
if you don't have a guaranteed national income, you start having a lot of political unrest, and you have, you have
He's saying an income cap,
a
right?
guaranteed minimum income. Is what
I'm sorry.
And I mean that prevents the kind of brutal transition that we've been talking about as being inevitable. It's not inevitable if we vote in a way of softening that blow, or a way of taking hold of the economy as a nation state to make sure that this brutal vision doesn't take place, the brutal part of it.
And to your point, Mark, this is going to affect everybody. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine that I went to college with, and she was saying something to the effect of automation for McDonald's. She says, well, we have automation at McDonald's, those demands for $15 an hour are going to go away. And I said, well, that's true, but your husband happens to be a medical doctor. His job is going to go away. And so what people don't realize with these advanced algorithms is that even high-end specialties, such as doctors and engineers, they're even more vulnerable than the factory workers. I remember when the blue-collar worker jobs were going away, people were saying, all you have to do is become computer savvy, and then your future will be guaranteed. That didn't pan out.
I remember
and it's not going to pan out in the future either.
I was a student, and in that time, undergraduate student, I remember thinking about going into computer science, and everybody was saying,
That's the future.
That's the future. But now, when I talked to the guy at Ferris recently, he was saying, well, these are the tech jobs that may not be outsourced. So, and then once they're outsourced, but Rick, sorry, to get back to that point, I'm not sure how that'll work. But I think the minimum wage, the Republicans would argue that state of everyone's guaranteed a minimum income, and in Sweden and Denmark, that's a 50% tax on anyone who works. So,
right, but even
especially
in those
the wealthy.
even in those countries, though, I think people have the stereotyped idea that everybody in Sweden or Denmark is just laying around on welfare. But there are millionaires and even billionaires in those countries. So
Yeah, but they just pay a lot more tax than they do
Yeah,
here.
and-
But they're still wealthy within their own societies, for sure.
Well, the solution is political. We can have all the technology, but if you don't have leaders like Bernie Sanders who are willing to tax these billionaires and create a better society, you can have all the technology that you want, but if you don't have somebody who cares about people, it's
Right.
useless.
That's why we need people like Bernie Sanders, and his running mate should be Elizabeth Warren.
Yes, I agree.
That. I mean, but I think that's always what the Republicans will go against that minimum income. They would always say, well, you're creating a welfare state. Who's going to pay for that? That's always the question is, we're not going to pay, the common people are not willing to pay in America 50% of their income to supplement. I mean, that's what they'd say.
I'm not sure that that's true.
That may be the case that they would.
Considering,
but we have
If
to
you gave them
remember-
free health care, you
We have to
gave them
remember back
free.
in the 50s, and I'm old enough to remember this, when Dwight Eisenhower was president, the top rate for wealthy people was 91%. Bernie's not even asking for that.
yeah, and the society was fine. We still had wealthy people then. They were just not super wealthy or super haughty. And they didn't necessarily, as you yachted up and down the East Coast, you didn't see, 150 servants to every mansion. There was some gardener and, maybe somebody inside the house.
But raising the taxes on the wealthy require the wealthy to get behind that legislation, and I think it's like
They
asking.
control the legislation.
It's like asking. It's like asking the the gatekeeper to.
Asking the wolf to take care of the shit.
It's like that. I think that is
It's
a
like,
good analogy. It's like asking the wolf to take care of.
Well, no, you got Warren Buffett, who would probably be for it. Bill Gates might be for it. That's only two people, but look how much money those two have alone, just those two.
I think they have as much combined income as the bottom 70 countries of the world.
Something
Between
like
the two of
that.
them.
But
The continent of Africa, if you exclude Nigeria and South Africa.
it's enough to feed and clothe 5 Rush Limbaughs. But anyway, that's a different story. I just try to throw a little humor in there once in a while.
Good.
Sometimes we have to laugh to keep from crying, right? Well,
Well,
okay,
and the
gentlemen.
thing of it is like the future, in as much as history repeats itself in terms of certain general patterns, the future is still going to be radically different from the past.
Oh, yeah.
And this is going to be a new unknown territory. And you guys are right in terms of, ideally, there should be some policy making to anticipate and soften, like you say, Mark, some of these harsh realities. But in the example I was giving you, where you have a broken arm and you put it in a machine that will automatically diagnose it and take care of it for you, that's going to eliminate 6 jobs. And the question is, you're not going to be taxing 6 different people anymore.
That's the thing.
So the paradigm has shifted. And so for me, in as much as I don't necessarily mind trying to exercise my constitutional right for voting and voting for the best leaders we can possibly have, to be honest with you, I'm not going to be hoping and resting on the notion that they're going to bring the solutions to me. And so in as much as we need to be politically active, we also need to be thinking in terms of how we're going to be proactive on our communities in order to be able to scale at our level solutions that can be sustainable. Energy, food, manufacturing, or small-scale manufacturing.
To back you up on that with the technology as well is that we saw tech jobs like X-ray technicians. Hospitals are cutting out X-ray technicians because they take the X-rays, they send them to India, which is a 15-hour time difference. Those doctors in India read them and send them back. Now, to get to a point where everybody has a guaranteed income, we have to have corporate profits being taxed. But right now, what's happening is corporations have become expert at basically creating a dwindling tax base.
And
for the
mind you,
United States.
corporations will go away.
You know what do they do? Like, there is people who design machines to cut metal, right? Here in
Tool makers.
in Michigan. Well, these designers used to work here in Michigan and get very good money for their job.
Tool and die, yeah.
So now they hire people in India or China or whatever. There is a designer or engineer who knows how to do this, and they get 10% of what an engineer here in Michigan was getting.
Right.
So this is the future, you know.
Well, that's the future for now, but
No
then,
more jobs.
But then
for-
those Indians,
for
they really want to
engineers.
lay off the Indian people too, and the Chinese people, because what they really want to do is create robots that will do everything. Like I was saying, algorithms. They want to.
What's algorithms, Tony?
Yeah, what's that?
What is algorithm?
Algorithms. Well, maybe you can explain it better than me. But one thing along algorithms that's making algorithms possible is the cloud and big data. And the big data, they're taking big data. The people who own it, like Google, owns a lot of it, and they're crunching it. And
Every
they're
time you click, they know what you're doing and thinking.
exactly, and they're taking all that information and they're. I don't want to say they're using it against people, but they're definitely using it for their own profit
Profit.
motives. And
But,
so,
but when you say these jobs are going to disappear, what is the time, the
15 years.
In 50 years,
In
all these jobs are going to
in the next
disappear?
15 to 30 years, I told my children who are in college, all of them right now, I said, what you're studying, the job that you're going to have in the future, near future, does not exist today. So study your math, science, know how to read and write very well, and even know a couple of other languages, and then you'll be okay. But the jobs that today exist will no longer be here in the next 30 years or so.
think of it this way: there were people 20 years ago who were studying very intently how to develop film, you know, and now
So
there's no
digital.
job for them. So I think there were people who were studying how to put cars together, how to do this, how to do that. Well, you're studying one programming language, and then 5 years later, that programming language is complete history. You know, nobody's even using that. Let's
Well,
say,
and
or-
besides that,
So what is going to happen? Like, there are no jobs. Republicans
The
don't want
human- the
to
human-
give you social services. They don't want to tax the billionaires or millionaires.
Humanity is wired for
What is
survival.
gonna happen?
Humanity is wired for survival. So if we could survive using rocks and sticks, we should, and somehow or another be able to manage fire, we should be able to survive the new technological shift and revolution. Yes, it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be faster and greater than anything we've ever experienced before.
I mean,
but-
banks are going to go and take your house. Police going to put you in jail.
Well, that
Well-
happened in 2008.
yes.
well,
It's already happening, right?
Well, I think that you have a situation where if nothing else is done except people accept the situation up to this point. Uh,
The people
You're
think the
expecting-
solution is
you're-
Donald Trump.
you're expecting
Politicians are not the
or
solution.
Bernie.
Yeah.
You got
Well,
Trump or
Bernie-
Bernie.
Bernie is more is viable.
Politicians are not the solution. We put
Trump
our
is
hopes
a
and
demagogue.
our trust in the politicians that they're going to be the big daddies in this case,
Well,
that are going to take care of us.
But
They're not.
the constitutional regime of the United States is something that still exists, and if the people inhabit that body politic, that regime, they can
Demand.
they can make demands, and they can actually shape the society that they're in, rather than wait for these more right-wing forces to come around and tell you that you're worthless because you don't have a job, and there are more and more of you that don't have a job. So the end of your Constitution, because that was only intended for people who had jobs.
It comes down to
and you don't have jobs, so
It comes down to creating a new paradigm, because I think we keep banging the drum. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Who's going to give us jobs? Donald Trump will give us jobs. This is the problem. But people don't understand that. I think through automation, technology, robotics, data
Renewable
analytics,
energy.
renewable energy, we're just creating a completely different paradigm for society. There won't be this complaining about creating jobs, because people will say,
Well,
"What?"
that's my
how to-
question. Like, jobs are gone, right?
They're going pretty fast. A lot
I
of
mean,
them.
like in 50 years, you say, no? 50 years,
30 years.
30 years, jobs are gone.
No, wait,
What
let
are
me
we gonna
qualify
do?
that. The jobs that exist today will not exist in 30 years from now. So there will be different type of jobs that we don't
Like
even know
what
about
kind?
today.
well, it's quite possible that you have a job where society says, okay, you're a citizen, so you go, oh, I'm a citizen, so you study, you keep track of politics, you go and vote, and you do your blog on the internet, because no one needs to do jobs, because jobs have become meaningless, because the surplus value of what the machine economy is already creating takes care of this stuff. There's no reason that we shouldn't be in that kind of situation right now. The only reason we're not in that situation is that those who have a lot wanted more and more, and they took it all, and they took it to China with them.
Number one reason, I heard this recently and it blew my mind. The number one factor for income inequality is highly advanced computer-driven algorithms. In other words,
definitely.
whenever you can buy low
I would
and
agree.
sell high with no risk, you're talking about having free money. And
You're talking about designing
paper,
programs.
wealth.
Maybe
When
you can
when
explain the
talk about
algorithm a little bit to
Okay,
us.
algorithms is like we've had big data since the 1990s. I personally have big data in the sense that I have a library with 10,000 books. I'm a nerd, 100% nerd. And so that doesn't necessarily help me as an individual, as a human being, to be a better person. What algorithms do in terms of augmented my own intelligence is the ability to take all that massive data that is very difficult to maneuver through, and it creates insights that I can act upon. So now, for example, rather than waiting for me to
So
have
that's algorithm.
algorithms
Algorithm.
is smart searching of information that brings it to you so that you know how to benefit from it in terms of, for example, my health.
In simple words, you manipulate data, right?
Well,
The data
algorithms.
manipulates you, but the data also gives you concrete things that help you. So rather than me waiting
That
3
you can
years,
act upon.
that I can act upon, rather than me waiting 3 years for me to
Information,
to have a
right?
heart attack, now I had data telling me, look, if you don't do this, here are this health indicators in terms of your glucose, in terms of your weight, and all these things. In 3 years and 4 months, you're gonna have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Now with wearing these monitors that tracks my heartbeat, respiration, temperature, and all of this, now I'm able to gather all this data, and now there's this application that tells me with fairly reasonable accuracy what my chances for diabetes, what my chances for heart attacks are going to be, and now I can more smartly and more intelligent do that. What does that require? It requires, for example, to have a better lifestyle, better nutrition, but this nutrition can be very expensive. So now I have another app, talk about big data, basically saying, where can I go and shop for the best value, not the lowest price necessarily, but the best value to maintain the better health.
To put,
But I mean, like, how many people are gonna be manipulating data?
There-
If you have a gun to your head, and you know your
people.
children, if you know your daughter's gonna die, you would definitely get righteous and say, you know what, I need to figure this out. And I think people are going to do that because it's going to get very critical at some point. Because you're right. I mean, the shift is going to be very drastic and for some people somewhat even violent. But we are wired to survive. And like I said, if we could survive with rocks and sticks, we can definitely survive with what we have available to us.
On another note about algorithms, though, I think it's, to sum it up in a way, it's the organization of large amounts of data and using
data,
it.
no? Using
but
data.
But I
It
think it's
isn't
like
just data. It's data coming to you and saying, Pablo, tomorrow when you drive to work, take this particular route because there's this traffic.
Information, right?
it takes information and it takes all that information and it extracts meaning from it. It's analytics. It's big data analytics and the use of that. But here's the thing. I think it's like guns. Algorithms are like guns. If you have an algorithm, you can monitor your health, your daughter's health, you can understand things, you can improve your life. But the powerful have more guns. See, the Google has better algorithms. The police, how will the police use algorithms?
The U.S. military has the best algorithm there is out
Exactly.
there with their drones. They can actually strike 30, 50, 60 miles away at a target that has been programmed in where we don't even know exactly who that person is.
But they are not accurate. Right?
So we as individuals, we're saying, look, I got this
They're getting
algorithm.
hospital.
They're getting that way.
We're saying, look, I got this algorithm on my smartphone, but they're saying, the police are saying, we know where all these political revolutions are, we can stamp them out, we can go here, we can go there. So they're using them. I'm just wondering if the powers that be, whoever they may be, will use these algorithms for good or
dictators
for
like
bad.
Stalin or Hitler would have loved to have the technology
Exactly.
we have today.
They said
But-
Facebook's a dream for law enforcement.
Oh, the NSA doesn't have to do much of anything.
Exactly.
They don't have to go to Facebook. Look at their update. Wow, okay, we're going to follow them there.
I mean, we think we're getting something because we have this software that allows us to put our family and friends on it and communicate. But they're saying, yes, we know exactly what you're doing. So I'm just thinking.
And what I would hope, and I don't know if this is idealistic on my part, is that we have hackers such as Anonymous saying, hey, you know what? The powers that be, we're going to make sure that we're going to create counter systems and resources to keep our privacy. There's a debate right now going on.
Privacy
Apple.
is huge right
now.
now.
The government is saying we need to be able to break into
Well,
every Apple.
we are approaching the end of our show. Any final thoughts? We talk about the future. According
Future's
to
going to be wonderful and terrible as it's always been.
Wolfgang is very optimistic about the future.
I'm neutral.
I'm neutral.
Anthony,
I'm optimistic,
very
but I
optimistic.
think we like Wolfgang.
Algorithms.
Like Wolfgang, I feel we have to be, as individuals, we have to be vigilant. We have to be active and involved. Just like Bernie is encouraging us to be active and involved in the political process, we have to be active and involved in the direction of technology.
And then to Mark's point, we live in a country of laws made by a constitution that says that we the people can mandate how their future is to be.
Well, thank you very much. This was O Say Can You See, a show produced by CTV. Thank you very much, Wolfgang, Mark, Anthony, and my name is Pablo Bello. I'll see you later, alligator. And well, I don't think the future is too bright, but
It's scary. It is very scary, but it's
I
not-
mean, we have this Nazi Donald Trump who wants to take over. That's very, very scary. Man.
Well, I think of Donald Trump is I think he's misdirecting the people to think about the problem, like is the wrong problem. Like he's saying he's blaming berry pickers, but in fact it's corporations who have been outsourcing the
Well,
jobs.
one thing that Donald
he's
Trump-
blaming Muslims.
He's
one thing
blaming-
that Donald Trump.
You guys are going to be all right. Guess what? We're still going to be challenged with the future. Regardless